Fear is not bad. It's a natural reaction. It's a natural emotion. We just can't let it control us and keep us from living a full life.
Doing things that are fun.
Yes, like it keeps us doing a lot of fun things.
I love swimming.
Yes.
I used to hate it.
And imagine all the things that you would have missed out on in life if you held on to that fear. You wouldn't be this fish in the water and loving to swim, right? So I love that. Important lesson for us. Okay. So the last question is, if you could do something today to make your community a better place for everyone, what would it be? Oh wait, she's excited. She's clapping, y'all. Welcome to Living in 3D Power. Discover your truth, discern your path, determine your power. I'm Dr. Amber Sessoms, and together, let's unlock our power, build authentic connections, and foster collective liberation. Hey y'all, welcome back to episode 3 of Living in 3D Power. Today we're going to be talking about our strengths. And I think this is really imperative, particularly in this moment after the chaos that was ensuing last week with the executive orders and all the theatrics and all of the harm. And I was going to say unintended harm because that's something that I focus on not doing in my work, but this is intended harm, if we're being honest. And I think what we need to focus on, particularly as people from historically marginalized groups, is finding out the truth of who we are, because we live in a world that will consistently double and triple down on telling us that we don't belong, that we are inferior. But we have to stay rooted and grounded in the ancestral wisdom and the God-given wisdom that we are inherently amazing human beings. So part of the work that I do is focusing on our VSNs, our values, our strengths, and our needs. And I really start my work there with organizations and with people, because so often we don't ever talk about those things. And what I consider them to be is our internal compass. They help us to know when we're in alignment, when we're out of alignment. But in particular today, I want to focus on strengths. And you'll see in the next segment where Emma will be able to unpack her own strengths that she learned from her personality assessment. And I think it's just really cute because Emma is so confident. And once again, she surprised me in her level of confidence and knowing herself. And that is the work, y'all. It is knowing yourself unapologetically, digging into who you are as an individual in a world that tries to make us a cookie cutter version of what we should be. We are here dimming our lights, y'all. We are here being bifurcated versions of ourselves and not embracing our wholeness and our fullness because the world is not willing to embrace that. The people in this world that want to dictate the way that the world is. And what we are charged to do is I think about it last week where we talked about the light from Michelle Obama's podcast, but we are here to let our light shine and to get people curious about what is that something that's in that person. I want to know more about that so that I can align better with that as well and find that light within me. Part of how you do that is focusing on knowing your strengths, doing some work. So if you have not been to my website, I have on there, and I'll put this in the show notes, a free resource for you. And it is looking at what are my favorites. So if you can't see me, I have a wall-to-wall bookshelf here. And that was always one of my things. If I get my own office, I'm going to have a wall-to-wall bookshelf. And part of what is on my favorites list, as I pull this up on my phone, is a list of my favorite books, a list of my favorite podcasts, and also a list of my favorite self-assessments. So as a school psychologist, we are pretty steeped in our assessment classes in different assessment tools, personality classes. So I find it really interesting, especially in the business world. They love taking assessments. They love taking the DISC. They're focusing on Enneagram. There's all these new assessments out there. So particularly when I left the field of education and started my business full time, I started coming across more and more assessments. And I got really curious because we talk a lot about psychometrics in school psychology. So on the favorites list, you will see at the back end my favorite self-assessments, and you will see 3 that are highlighted. And that is the core values exercise, universal basic needs, and the VIA character strength survey. So looking at your values, strengths, and needs. And the VIA character strength survey is what I want to walk us through today with Emma in the following segment. But I just want to unpack for a moment what my strengths are, because I've taken so many of these assessments, it can get really overwhelming. And sometimes people get really obsessed with just, oh, let me take another one. Let me take another one. And they don't ever stop and really make meaning from it. It's just the thing of just taking the assessments. I think I started in 2019 with Strength Finders. So one of our mentors, when I was a part of a diversity organization in our local area, she had us take the Strength Finders 2.0 assessment. And there I came out with input, connectedness, intellection, learner, and achiever. And from there, I just kind of went down the rabbit hole of these assessment tools. But I'm putting them all together today to really try to make meaning from that. And you'll see in a minute why making meaning is so important to me. 1, because I'm a school psychologist. 2, because adult education is very steeped in making meaning. And this is a strength of mine. So I think it's really imperative in this moment, again, when this world is telling us literally that your safety is not a concern of ours, that we have to say it absolutely is. And we will find safety in community. We will find safety and agency and liberation in knowing the truth of who we are. So we are going to spend some time today talking about who we are as individuals and what is our individual strengths. So what I did was I took all those assessments. I think I did maybe 5 or 6 different ones. So Spark Type, Strength Finders, Enneagram, 16 personalities, VIA character strengths. And I wanted to see what would that look like. I put it in ChatGPT. Now, I'll say this, ChatGPT has a lot of my information in terms of my vision, mission, and purpose, my website, all of those things, the work that I do. So it knows a little bit about me. Sounds creepy, like I'm talking about someone I know. So this bot has information about me. So when it generated a synthesis, a meaning making of all of these different assessments, it knew enough about me that I could pull from some additional resources that I already put into the memory bank. But here's what it came up with is terms of my integrated narrative of who I am, which I find really interesting. So I'm just going to read it to y'all. At your core, you are a visionary leader, mentor, and lifelong learner, driven by a commitment to liberation and equity. You excel at creating spaces where individuals can feel seen, heard, and empowered to reclaim their narratives. Your work is deeply values aligned, combining intellectual rigor with emotional depth to craft tools and frameworks that inspire personal and collective transformation. Your ability to synthesize complex issues and connect them to actionable strategies makes you uniquely equipped to guide others. As an Enneagram 8, your strength and resilience are undeniable, but your greatest power lies in your willingness to balance this with vulnerability and collaboration. This balance allows you to lead with authenticity, fostering trust and inspiring others to step into their own power. Not bad, ChatGPT. So I really appreciate that it wove in all those different aspects from the Enneagram, from the Spark, from 16 personalities to really come up with a synopsis, an integrated narrative, as it called it, of who I am. I don't want you to stop there, though. I think it's really interesting. And again, I would say just start with the VIA character strengths assessment. That is a free tool. It will give you a printout of your top 5 strengths, but it'll give you a list of all of them, but it orders it in level of significance where your strengths lie. And it gives you a brief synopsis. So I'm holding up, if you can't see me, I'm holding up my printout that this is from June 16th, 2023. And my top strength is perspective. Next is bravery, love of learning, social intelligence, and honesty. And it gives you a brief write-up of each one. Now, you can pay for your top 5 report, and that will cost you $19, or you could get the top 24, which gives you all 24 strengths, and that would be $49. I think the free version does give you enough information. So, for example, one being perspective, what it wrote here was being able to provide wise counsel to others, having ways of looking at the world that makes sense to oneself and others. So it's just going to give you a little blurb. But what you can also do is you can look on the website and you can say, okay, perspective, and then you could Google that or put that in the search. And then it will give you additional information based off of that one strength. So I think there's value in this free assessment, and then you just dig a little deeper. And that is the purpose, right? That we don't just take these personality assessments and be like, oh, well, that's great. We spend some time thinking about, does this really reflect who I am? Is this true for me all the time? Some of the time, I will have people, particularly when they're taking conflict resolution assessments, and they'll say, well, am I talking about at work or am I talking about at home? And then it leads into a conversation about, am I different at work than I am at home? And the goal, at least in my work, is that we can be ourselves authentically in each of our spaces, that I don't have to be someone different at work, at home, in community, at church. And often I will hear from women and they'll say, I was in 5 different meetings today and I was 5 different people, and that was exhausting. So the goal for us, right, is to not have to mask, particularly for Black and brown people or people from historically marginalized backgrounds, that we have to fake it when we're in certain spaces. And oftentimes that means because we're trying to make sure that we're safe. But in particularly right in this world right now that we're living in, that is paramount. So I'm taking a collective breath, just thinking about that and the heaviness of that. And at the same time, how do we continue to honor our dignity and not let this despair destroy us from the light that we have? And again, this is why I think this is such an important step right now for you. We're starting out the new year. We're almost into February. For me, and being a Black woman and celebrating Black History Month next month, and the following month being Women's History Month. So this is my time, y'all. So you're going to get all of this goodness, all of this in this moment. And I think it's really important to celebrate who you are, but also to know what your strengths are, and then also know what some of your weaknesses or challenges are. So Dr. Brian McClure is also a Black school psychologist, and I love that he came up with this phrase. Now at this point, Emma even knows it, but it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's strong with you. And that resonates so deeply in a world, again, that will have us fixating on everything that's wrong. Like last week where Emma and I talked about, I'll talk about my body and Emma say, you're beautiful, mommy. Don't talk about your body like that, like body shaming myself. And because the world tells me that I have to look a certain way, right? That I have to show up a certain way. And if I don't, then I'm not feminine enough, or I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not wanted. And it's such a harmful, negative narrative that we adopt, particularly as women. So in thinking about how do I stop this incessant need to focus on all of my flaws, and how do I play to my strengths? So if you're not watching, I have a shirt on and you might not be able to see it. Let me see if I can hold it up a little bit. The arm of my mic might be in the way, but I have a crew neck sweatshirt on, and it says Strength-Based School Psych. And this is a company that my colleague and friend, Dr. Kelsey Reed, started because she is on a mission to ensure that we as adults focus on where our strengths lie, but in particular, like living that out loud, helping our students understand what their strengths are. So playing to their strengths, embodying these strengths in everything that they do. There's so much research, y'all, that shows the benefits of this. And I'm thinking way, way, way back, one that always comes to mind, just thinking about how we humanize people, is the work of Dr. Claude Steele in Stereotype Threat, where he did some amazing work on when we humanize someone's experience, when we ask them what they love, what they value, what their strengths are, what they're good at, it is a transformative experience, because now we are looking at you and saying, there is something important about you that needs to be shown to this world, in a world that's telling you otherwise. So I'm going to take a moment to cultivate this space so that you can take a pause to reflect on that. And that's the work of this podcast today, that we want you to take a moment, take a pause to say, what is it about me that makes me come alive, that I can play to my strengths and not let the needs or the weaknesses that this world tells me about impact my ability to show up fully. So also, right, we still have to focus on what are some of the needs and the challenges that we have, and how can we leverage our strengths to help us work towards those goals. So also, when I put this in ChatGPT, another thing that it said, it gave me some insights to shape my work, talking about how I design liberatory frameworks, facilitating healing and growth, and balancing vision and grounding. And some next steps, it says, lean into vulnerability. Now, if you've heard my story, if you read my blog, I talked about my lived experience and the sense of abandonment that I've experienced from my mother leaving at the age of 4. And many of you have heard me in keynotes. I will tell my story. I'll tell different facets of my story. There's some other things that have gone on in my life, and it can often look like vulnerability. So here's what I will caution you with. If you are one to readily tell your story and be like, it doesn't matter, you can't shame me, I want you to take a pause and really think about, in me telling my story, have I really sat in what those experiences did to me emotionally? What does it really feel like? What did it feel like in that moment? And what does it feel like now? So part of it can be, yes, there's liberation in that because I have detached the feeling, the trauma response to that. But some of it is that we disassociate, that we disconnect ourselves from our entire bodies and our meanings. And so I can rattle off a story about myself as if I am a news reporter. And this is something that my therapist told me. I would just say something that happened traumatic, like it was a news story, as if I'm reporting it and it wasn't happening to me. So what she has done is give me permission to sit in it, to be still, and the experience and question and get curious about, where is that coming up in my body? And for me, it's always centered around my chest, right? The heaviness that I feel there. So I just want to caution you that if you are like, yes, I am vulnerable, I'm doing all those things, there's a difference between telling your story and really embodying and feeling what that brings up and evokes in you. So the next steps for me, it said, lean into vulnerability. Practice showing more of your softer side, especially in spaces where trust and connection are key. So this softness coming from the Enneagram 8, where I am an activist, I'm a 98% Enneagram 8. So I will come in and advocate for the underdog. And Chichi Ogorum talks about being an Enneagram 8 is I would say, the paramount Enneagram where you're wearing the cape as a Black woman. So in particular, in this book, she is talking about Black women liberation. So I have that cape on, y'all, and I wear that thing proudly. And that's a part of our family narrative and our history. And what she's saying, take that cape off. You're tired, right? You're exhausted. It's depleting you. And also what she said is what really hit me was that I'm fighting for the underdog because no one fought for me. So when you have these narratives and these lived experiences and you don't unpack them and you navigate and you go through life, you may not see the connections that it makes and how you show up now. So when you take a minute to go back and say, let me start with my strengths, let me start with my values, let me start with my needs, to see what is showing up in those assessments and how that aligns with who I am or who I thought myself to be, right? I think it's really important. So also, what it has me focusing on is looking at delegate and collaborate. So delegate tasks that align with your maker anti-spark type to preserve energy for your strengths. I do love creating, y'all. But here's the thing. My husband's an art director. So things that I do that I love to do, it will take me 3 times as long to do it. Whereas my husband, it could take him 15 minutes, right? So how do I use my energy more for things, my intellectual curiosity, and delegate or collaborate with other people that are more well-versed in areas that it could free up some of my time so that I can do more of the things to feed the content that I need to produce. So that was really important for me as well. Celebrate growth. Acknowledge your progress and impact to avoid feeling perpetually unfinished. And that comes from the 16 personalities and also having this achiever tendency. So I want to accomplish things. And that is part of living in this white capitalist society, that we always have to be doing something. And I talk about this on my blog, that our productivity somehow gets attached to who we are innately. And that's not true, right? So I and my dignity are inherent. There's nothing I have to do to earn that. No amount of accolades or degrees or titles or things that I produce in this world show me worthy to exist. So that's something I have to remind myself of in a world that is celebrating my wins or attacking my wins or attacking my work, because that's real too, that I have to focus on. It doesn't matter what I put out there. I am simply enough just because I'm a living, breathing human being. And then the last thing is set for next steps is expand connection. So focus on nurturing communities of support and belonging, as relationships are key to both your fulfillment and impact. And this makes a lot of sense to me because I am currently cultivating the 3D Power Collective. And it's based off my dissertation where I focused on Black female identity development in digital spaces. And particularly in this moment where online spaces, social media is being attacked. I'm getting shadow banned myself. Content is not reaching who it needs to reach because now we have this oligarchy and these people coming in power that want to dictate where and when we can showcase our work, and they will distill it down. It's been proven already. I've seen it just on an individual level. So how do we create some spaces if that's in-person events? That is the goal, the hope, the vision, that there's in-person events, but creating this hybrid model for people that don't have access to get to you personally, or that I have colleagues and friends on the West Coast that don't have the ability to be like, oh, let me just hop on a plane and get over to Pennsylvania. So how do we create this level of accessibility and this community in digital spaces where we can show up fully, where we can unpack the hurt, harm, and the dangers that are coming our way? But also what happens in these communities, in these spaces, is that we develop the discourse, because you have that tip of the tongue thing that happens, or I can't find the exact words, but I know what I'm trying to say. And then someone else says it and you're like, that's exactly how I feel. I find that from bookshelf. So I'm pointing at my bookshelf. Books give me the language. People give me the language. And you're only going to get that when you're in community with people, in cultivating these liberatory spaces. So that is definitely aligning with who I am and who I desire to be. So I hope you enjoy this segment today with Emma as she unpacks her strengths from her kid perspective. And the beauty of it is, if you can start learning your strengths younger and younger, right? Imagine where Emma's going to be when she's my age. Imagine where she's going to be when she's your age. Because at 10 years old, she's confident. She's like resolute about, yeah, that's me. I own that. I own those strengths. In a world that's going to tell a little Black girl, if you don't go sit down somewhere, if you don't dim your light, she is like, I'm going to take up the space. I'm going to shine, and I know who I am. So I hope that she encourages you to also be bold in who you are and how you show up, and be curious enough to do some of this work. So again, go to the show notes or go to my website under resources, and you will see my favorites list that you can download for free to take some of these assessment tools. Because what I hope it does, it unlocks something in you where you were so focused on all the things that are quote unquote wrong with you, that you can create a dynamic shift in who you are and how you show up and say, those were lies I bought into, or I was so overly fixated on what's quote unquote wrong with me that I wasn't focusing on what was strong with me. So that is our mission and our purpose for today, is to make sure that you're doing that work. Create a pause, take a beat, take an assessment, and sit in it and see where it's true for you. And how do you create community? How do you create safety? How do you create these opportunities where you can showcase all of who you are, not a little version of it? Right? How do I showcase all of who I am in all of my spaces? Because when we get the brilliance of you, everyone's going to benefit. Your workforce, your family, your friends, all of that. But if you are dimming your light, if you are shrinking because someone else might be threatened by your strengths, what you're going to do is take this assessment and say, I'm going to practice it. I'm going to try it on, and I'm going to sit in it and honor who I am and who I know myself to be in a world that tells me otherwise. So I hope you enjoy this next segment with Emma, soak up all her confidence, and I hope you bring all of that with you as we navigate going into February.
It's me, it's me, it's me. It's me, it's me, it's me.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, episode 3. Today we are going to talk about our strengths.
Yes. So what did you do this morning to prepare for this podcast today?
I did the VIA character strength, where you answer questions and it picks your strengths.
I think it's an awesome tool. I've actually never used it with elementary students. I typically work with middle and high school students, so it was really cool having you do that assessment and seeing your results. So for those who aren't familiar, the VIA Character Strengths Assessment is a research-based, evidence-based tool, free, that we like free, tool that you can use to identify your top 5 strengths. And Emma took that assessment this morning, and you want to share what your results were from that assessment?
My top 5 are kindness, love, humor, fairness, and bravery.
And do any of those surprise you?
No.
So, I mean, for the first one to be kindness, I think that's pretty spot on. And I think it's cool because on this podcast, we've talked about your level of empathy and your compassion for others. You're showing everyone your results. And it gives you a little synopsis of what each one is. And you said your top one is kindness. And kindness says doing favors and good deeds for others, helping them, taking care of them.
Yes.
Very true about you. What was your second one?
My second one was love.
Love. Valuing close relations with others, in particular those in which sharing and caring are reciprocated, being close to people. So true of you. So how do you feel after taking that assessment? How did it make you feel seeing those results?
Honestly, I was not surprised.
Oh, excuse me. Why not?
Because I already knew. that.
How do you know that?
I just knew that I was all these things.
I love that you already knew. And I think the beauty of you is that there are so many people in this world who don't know what their strengths are. They play more to their weaknesses. They talk about and identify their weaknesses and not their strengths. And Dr. Brian McClure, who's another Black school psychologist, shout out Dr. McClure, talks about it's not what's wrong with you, but what's strong with you.
With you.
You were going to say that along with me because I've said it a few times, so I think it's kind of starting to stick with you. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what's
strong with you.
Right. So it's important that we don't focus so much on the negative aspects or the things that we consider weaknesses, that we focus on the positives. And in this society that we live in, particularly right now with the first week in office, and now it's going to the second week, there's so much of what's happening in these executive orders, which is what the president is signing off and saying, we want to get rid of this, and we're going to stop these safety parameters. And it's really impacting people that look like us, Black and brown people that have different identities, queer people, people with disabilities that are seen as different and other. So for us to take a moment to sit and focus on our strengths is empowering for you as a youth, because we live in a world that would rather have us focus on our deficits. And we're saying we're reclaiming our power. We're taking it back, our strengths. And we're saying, I like when you do this finger thing. She has this finger wag that she does where she doesn't even move her hand. It's just the finger moves. But we're saying, no, we have a tremendous amount of strengths, and we're going to identify what those are, and we're going to live them out loud because it makes us powerful and strong. So I love that for you.
Yes.
And I took this assessment maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2021. So I've done this for a few years now in my work with adults and with middle schoolers and high schoolers. And I absolutely love seeing people identify what their strengths are. And one of the questions I ask, which one makes you most proud? So for you, which one makes you most proud when you look at those top 5?
Let's see. I think my favorite one would be fairness.
Fairness?
Fairness.
Tell me why.
Fairness because many people, well, we did this thing where we were learning about bullying and what to do if you see someone bully, because it was no name calling week. We were reading a book and it was like some people are afraid to stand up for other people because they think they will get targeted too.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't care about that, because why should they be bullying in the first place?
So you're like, an injustice is happening. It's not fair. You can make me the target if you want, but I'm going to still say the thing. I'm going to still do what's right. Excuse me, ma'am. I love that. And you know what that ties in with? What was your other strength?
Bravery.
Yes. So you're all about, was it fairness?
Yes.
And bravery. So I think those are hand in hand, right? Because you're talking about there's an injustice happening. I am not going to worry about me being the target in this moment because I'm doing something to protect someone else, because that's right, because their dignity is being violated and I want to support them. And that's a sense of bravery in you, a tremendous amount of bravery, because I've talked to middle schoolers and high schoolers and they will say exactly what you said about, I don't say anything because I don't want to be a target. Because if I say something to protect someone else, it's going to make it worse for me. And there's a shame that's attached to them because they're afraid to do what's right because they don't want to be a target. So they stay silent. And you know what that does? It creates a culture of silence. So then you have multiple people in the schools and the communities that are just like, not my business. I ain't going to say anything. I'm going to protect myself. And so you have this culture of silence. And then those people that are being targeted feel alone. And it perpetuates the harm. So you're saying because your first strength, your number one is kindness, you can't, that's not going to sit well with you.
I'm like, if I see someone get bullied, I march right up and I'm like, hi. I don't even care if it's my friend or not, because we will be friends after.
Oh, because they'll be like, oh, she stuck up for me, so she's cool with me.
Yes.
And there's a level of safety that comes when people are kind and people stand in the gap to protect someone else that makes me know that you're a safe person. So I think that's beautiful that you're saying that you don't have to be my friend. You could be a complete stranger, but what I'm going to do is let this person know, not okay. And I think that's powerful, especially in schools and in communities, because again, that culture of silence will let you know, oh, that's just how we do things here. As adults, we'll come into new workspaces and people that have been there for years will be like, oh, that's not how we do things here. This is how we do things. And you can come in as being the disruption and saying, well, I'm not okay with this. But the culture of silence seems to prevail. But what you're saying is if there's more Emmas in the world that say that's not right, that creates a ripple effect so that we won't have that issue. What I love also is that we share a strength, and that is bravery. I think you got it from your mama.
Maybe.
That's my second strength. So my number one is perspective. So here's how VIA does a summary of that. Being able to provide wise counsel to others, having ways of looking at the world that makes sense to oneself and others, which ties in really well with my profession as a school psychologist and adult educator. So I'm helping people make meaning from their lives, like maybe some of their experiences, if they're having troubles or they need support. I can help them put those pieces together to make sense of their experience, which I think is really cool. And bravery, I'm a lot like you where I can't. I can't sit back. So in school, what we learn is when you're going through a psychology program, we learn about the bystander effect. Did they talk about that at all? They might not have mentioned it in that sense, but it's kind of what you talked about. So if you see someone being bullied or you see someone being harmed, we will tell ourselves, someone else is going to address that. I don't have to address it. But what happens is everyone starts thinking that way, that someone else will address it, and then no one actually addresses it. So that's a problem. So we have a thing called the bystander effect, or this is a phenomenon that happens. So we can't ever think that someone else is going to step in and fill in the gap. And I think because bravery is one of our top 5 strengths,
Bravery.
that's something that, we can rely on. But I'll say the other part of it, because bravery is really high for me, it can burn me out. I can start thinking that I have to be the one to do everything to save everyone. And then it leaves me really depleted. So what our job also has to be, because we have that strength, is that we find other people that we can help them to build up their sense of bravery and courage to also stand in a gap. So maybe we're the one that says something, but someone else needs to come along and echo and say, I agree with what Emma said. It's not right. But sometimes you have to stand alone, and that's really a lonely feeling, and it's frustrating because what happens to me as an adult, some people will come and say, oh, I felt the same way, but they won't say anything when it's happening, and I don't like that. So to y'all out there, for those of us that have bravery as a strength, and that might not be one of your core strengths, support us and echo and say, I agree. So if you do have bravery as a strength, also think about it does not always have to be us. We have to find other people that can support us along the way. So I love that. So top is perspective, bravery, love of learning. If y'all have seen the other part of the podcast, right, you can see all my books, wall-to-wall bookshelves. I love books.
Yes.
Literally came from a book study today. Social intelligence and honesty. So those are really important values and strengths for me. And then it makes sense about why I got into the career I got into, why I support people the way that I do, because it's so aligned and I'm playing to my strengths. So it helps me make sense of who I am as a person and as an individual. I'm like, oh, now I better understand myself, right? So I think that's pretty awesome. Yes. So thinking about that, when you look at your strengths, how does that tie in with what you're really good at or what you love doing?
I think it ties in to me because I am very kind to my friends, and I love my friends, and I make my friends laugh.
Because humor was number 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can stick up for my friends.
So I love this. And I think that's helpful to give yourself a beat, like a pause to be like, let me walk through how this shows up in my life to see if it fits for me. And also it helps you to say, am I playing to my strengths? Because if you go through those top 5 and you're like, ooh, I'm not really showcasing those. There might be a question you might ask, like, are those really my strengths? Or some of the things that I ask adults is, what are the conditions I need to make sure that I can showcase my strengths?
Yes.
So sometimes it's that you're not in the right environment to showcase your strengths. So what do we need to change about your environment? And that's where school psychologists and other people can come in and say, this is an unsafe environment for students or adults or whomever, and they can't play to their strengths. And what I find in my work is when I'm working with adults is that they're not able to play to their strengths. They're stuck in their roles. So I might be a school psychologist, a teacher, a principal, but I'm really, really awesome at this, or I really, really love this. But I'm pigeonholed, I'm stuck into this role, and I can't showcase that. And so they're just kind of depleted and they feel undervalued. So if they can play to their strengths, like you're saying, if you can walk through that, it's something transformative that happens. So I love that. And Emma, if you can't see her, Emma's mocking me because I use my hands a lot when I talk. That should be on the strengths list because I think there's a strength in using your hands. Emma might disagree, but you know what? Genetics. Because you use your hands too, ma'am.
When?
Oh, I see it. So, viewers, please let us know if Emma also uses her hands. I'm sure she doesn't. I do not. As you just did it with your hands.
No, I did not.
It is okay to use your hands. I am being expressive.
Expressive.
Right. It's a thing. Okay. So one of the other things I want to ask you is, who is a Black woman or girl you admire And what do you think makes her strong?
I have 3.
3?
Okay. They're all athletes.
Okay.
Jordan Childs, Simone Biles, and Sha'Carri Richardson.
Ooh. And what makes them strong? Those are good 3 choices.
Because I think gymnastics is very, 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 very tricky sport. And they have to do a lot of crazy things. And running is hard because it has to take a lot of muscles, and you have to work out.
So physical strength and also just
Mental.
Ooh, good point. So I think you might be getting that too because we watched the Simone Biles documentary. So again, here we are watching documentaries, but you've got the documentary bug, which I love. I think documentaries are powerful because they humanize people. So we don't just see them as the athlete and the superstar. They're actual people. And the Simone Biles documentary, I think, was a 4-part series. And we learned about a lot of things she had to overcome. Yes. And part of that was mental. And I think she became a mental health advocate because she was thrown into the spotlight. And she advocates for that and says that we have to be mentally well. And she talked about twisties, and which is why she had to pull out of the not this Olympics, but the past Olympics, because she could have really injured herself because she couldn't tell where she was in space. So you can land and really, really injure yourself. It is that serious in that sport. It's a scary sport. Phenomenal amount of courage and strength, endurance. So I love that you chose them as people that you see and admire and look up to, and then Sha'Carri. And I think the dynamic between all 3 is that they overcame some really challenging things in their life, right? Like think about Sha'Carri, and Emma will watch, y'all, she'll watch these YouTube kids shorts and she'll watch the Olympic trials or the competitions. She likes watching them, which I think is really cool because you're also a budding track star, which I love because Mama ran track and I'm like, yes, she got the bug. But they overcame really hard things in the public eye. And there's so much judgment that happens, right? If you have a public persona, in particular, if you are a Black girl or Black woman, it's like we don't get any grace. And then have you ever heard people say that if we make a mistake as a Black woman, every other Black woman kind of falls in that same camp? So one of us represents all, and we don't get the same level of grace.
It's like a classroom. If someone gets in trouble, then we all get in trouble.
Yeah. So I love that comparison. So for Black women, Black girls, because we represent the whole, they'll look at one of us and say, well, they made this bad choice, so all of them must be like that. And what I loved about Sha'Carri is that she had a whole community that embraced her and that she was humble. Yes. I think that's a beautiful part, that even if you make mistakes, it doesn't define who you are as a person. And I think that we need to hold on to that because you're mocking me again with your hands.
You love your hands.
But I think that's important to know. So I love that you chose real people. They've been scrutinized in the public. So think about Jordan Childs and how the medal was taken away from her and how harmful that was. But I think the awesome part, too, is that all of them embraced their culture.
Yes.
And in a world that tells us that our culture is devalued and not enough and not worthy of recognition, especially in light of these executive orders, they're saying, oh, I'm going to showcase that. Especially Jordan Child. Well, she'll come out and she's playing.
She's that girl.
She's that girl. I love that. So I love that you can be yourself, be authentically who you are in all your spaces, because people like us are watching and saying, I can be free to be me.
Yes.
Yay, I love that. Okay, so next question is, what is something hard you've done before and how did you make it through?
I think something hard for me was a fear. It involves water.
It involves water.
So I was afraid of swimming because when I was little, I drowned-ish.
You drowned-ish?
Ish.
When did this happen? Where was I? As I don't recall that.
You saved me. You saved me. You saved me.
Yeah, you were on a raft and you fell off the raft. That's a legitimate fear then. So if you had an incident, I remember when JoJo was, I don't know how old she was, but I remember I was pregnant with Maya, so she was probably 5 or 6. I had to jump in the water at her friend's pool party to save her because she started to panic when she got in the middle of the pool. She could swim, but she just started to panic. So that can live, right? If you don't overcome that fear, you might be afraid to ever get in the water. So how did you overcome that fear then?
One time I was at my friend's pool party. Well, it was a birthday pool party. And she had a pool. And I usually just sit on the steps because I didn't want to like just sit out of the water. So I just sit on the steps. And then I stepped into the water. And
You sound, you about to, that's a sermon right there. And then I stepped into the water. You about to preach that thing. You got real quiet, like, then I stepped into the water. And the Holy Ghost activated. Go ahead.
Then I swimmed.
You swam.
Swam.
Oh, you're putting up like quotations with your finger. So did you really swim?
No.
What did you actually do?
I was just like this.
With your feet down, just wading, kind of, not even wading, just
Yeah.
like kind of moving the water with your hands. So that was kind of your first instinct is, I'm going to conquer this fear, but I'm going to take it slow.
Yeah, I was like,
That fear is still back here, but you're like,
no.
but I can overcome it.
Now it's like a little pebble.
A little pebble, but it was a boulder maybe before.
Yes.
And it kind of left you trapped, but you're like, I can overcome this. And probably you felt safe because there's people around you, maybe that encourage you. And then also you see your other friends, you're like, man, they're out there having fun and I'm kind of over here.
My friends were literally diving on the diving board and in the deep end. And I was the only one in the shallow end.
So it didn't discourage you, it encouraged you.
Yes.
Which I think is important perspective because a lot of people could have seen that and been like, why, I want to go home. I don't even want to be here. Right? And you're like, nope. I can overcome this fear. I have a legitimate fear, but I'm going to overcome this boulder, and now it's a little pebble. So now Daddy will say, and I say, you're a fish in the water.
Yes.
I have video footage to prove this, y'all.
Swimming lessons.
Swimming lessons did it. People, get your swimming lessons in. American Red Cross. I think that's what I took when I was little. I don't know if this is. I'm trying to think of the program that you're doing. Learn to swim, but it's about being. I don't know necessarily like the term, but I get it, about being drown proof. So that if something happens, in how I talked about when JoJo was in the middle of the pool and she panicked, that if that happens to you, where maybe you get thrown in the water or something, that you won't panic, that you can just wade.
I still need to practice my back thingy, whatever it's called, my back float. Yeah,
So when you're swimming and then you have to flip over?
Yeah, I still can't do that. I did it once.
I mean, I've seen you do it. It's just that you have to keep practicing it, which I think is
Yes.
important. So it's not that you can't do it. It just takes some more practice, and that's okay.
But I can swim.
Yes, you can swim. Underwater and all. You have a beautiful stroke, as they said. They said she's a swimmer, so she should be a swimmer.
They said I'm a natural.
You're a natural.
Natural.
So some natural strengths there that you have there. I love that. So you overcame that fear, and I think that's an important lesson for all of us, that you started slow, you got some additional assistance, and now you're a fish. But there's still some things to work on, and that's okay. And I love that you said it was a big fear and it went to a little pebble.
Yes.
Fear is not bad. It's a natural reaction. It's a natural emotion. We just can't let it control us and keep us from living a full life.
Doing things that are fun.
Yes, like it keeps us from doing a lot of fun things.
I love swimming.
Yes.
I used to hate it.
And imagine all the things that you would have missed out on in life if you held on to that fear. You wouldn't be this fish in the water and loving to swim, right? So I love that. Important lesson for us. Okay. So the last question is, if you could do something today to make your community a better place for everyone, what would it be? Yes. Oh, wait, she's excited. She's clapping, y'all.
Save the houseless people, give them houses and food. and save world hunger.
Listen, I love it. So for you, having your number one being kindness,
Yes.
I think that is what is pushing you towards answering that question about something you want to do to better this place. You're aligning yourself with your strength of kindness and saying, we got to change this thing in the world. There's an injustice happening. And there's a level of bravery that has to come with that for you to name that in a world that would rather put, no shade, y'all, would rather put millions and billions of dollars into one Super Bowl, right?
10
Which
billion.
could solve world hunger. It makes you think, again, about going back to systems and think about how do we maintain these systems that are harming generations and entire groups of people, right? And how unfair is that?
Very.
Right. And we talked last week about leadership and being kind. And that is the depths of being unkind. So I think for you that you're embodying your strength and saying, this is something that I want to do. And what you can do now is that you hold on to that. You don't ever let that dream and that passion die. You find other people in your community that also have that same passion. And then you build and you freedom dream, which I like to talk about is freedom dreaming, and think about the world as it should be, not as it is, as it should be. And because you're young, don't let any of these systems or these people or these leaders ever deter you from doing what you know is right and just for the world.
Yes.
And that's a lesson that we all can learn. So those things that we had as a youth, when I think about when we see people that are houseless and you'll be like, Mommy, we need to help them. I feel like a lot of children are like that. And I think as we get, because I think all the girls were like that. All three of y'all were like that. And what happens oftentimes is that we get hardened because we listen to the narratives about, well, that's because they have mental health problems, or that's because they have addiction issues, or that's because they mismanage their funding. Whatever excuse we make to allow us to dehumanize the people, we have to create a story in our head to believe it to be true so that we don't care or that we can brush it off. And what I'm saying to you is that you hold on to your strengths, you hold on to your kindness and your bravery and you wanting fairness in this world and your humor. You execute those with boldness and fierceness because that's your superpower. Those are your superpowers when the world is going to tell you, go sit down, little girl. You're going to say, I'm
going to be like,
I'm a superhero.
I'm a superhero.
Because I have learned at the age of 10 what my strengths are. And I'm telling you, if I had learned that at 10, I just think I get excited about what you'll be like at my age because you're learning something that so many adults my age and older have never learned. So it's powerful that not only do you know that for sure, that these are your strengths, you also already knew it before you took the assessment.
Yes.
And I think that's a powerful part about knowing yourself. So Emma, I'm just, again, I feel like I end every segment saying, I'm just so proud of you as you continue to learn about yourself and you continue to grow and evolve and that your heart and compassion is so aligned with who you are as an individual that it's going to be unwavering because you're going to stay rooted and grounded in your strengths. And we're not going to play to our weaknesses. We're going to be strengths-based.
I'm a plant.
You are a plant. You're rooted and grounded in your strengths. So as we play to our strengths, the world is going to exponentially be better because we have Emma in it. And we're going to allow your light to grow. And my job is to make sure I harness that and just watch you flourish and change this world, shake this thing up.
Yeah.
All right. So we did it.
Yay!
Episode 3 in the books, y'all. You got to close out. What's your final words of encouragement for the people? As you clear your throat. Not dramatic at all. What you got to say to the good people? Reverend Doctor.
Jordan is that girl.
Jordan is that girl. You know who else is that girl?
Simone
Biles, but also Emma Sessoms is that girl.
Yes.
So was I right or was I right? I mean, the child exudes confidence. I love how when I asked her about when we're looking at your top strengths, like what are you most proud of? But also, is it true for you? And she's like, oh, I'm not surprised by any of this. Right? I knew this about myself. So she's like, I didn't need to take an assessment. I already knew this. It's just confirmation. And I think that's the beauty that Emma brings to this world. And she gives me permission to really sit in who I know myself to be and how can I do that deep work of knowing who I am before the world told me who I wasn't, right? So Maya Angelou talks about this and thinking about the inviolate place, getting to the place before any violations happened to us, before this world told us that we didn't deserve to be here, before all these executive orders, before all of these things, right? That we know for certain if we go back and think about who was I in my greatest moment before I introduced shame into my life. And I think that Emma embodies a lot of that, even if she has trials, right? Or she gets frustrated, that she can be resolute about who she is. So I just really appreciate that she's like, oh, I knew this about myself. And I love if you start digging deep into these strengths, is that kindness and bravery were some of her top 5 strengths and how she utilizes those, right? Sometimes people might not see those as being complimentary because I have to be kind. And it sometimes means, oh, if I'm being kind, then I'm not going to say anything because that is going to make people uncomfortable or they're going to look at me as this rebel rouser or always stirring the pot. And what Emma has to say to that is, and so what? Right? She's like, I don't understand how people don't say anything. We learned that in school. And she's right. So I've been in situations and meetings, and because of who I am and my personality, and bravery is high on my list and the activist in me, I will say the thing that everyone's thinking, but I'll say it. And what needs to happen is that people will say, I agree with what Amber says. I agree with what Dr. Sessoms says. But more often than not, what will happen is they will send me the side text, they will send me the private message or say, ooh, girl, I agree with you wholeheartedly. That is not okay. If someone is brave enough to speak up because they know change needs to happen, your responsibility is to echo what they're saying and to support them so that it doesn't become a me issue or a them issue because, oh, they always got to say that. It becomes there's a systemic issue here. And that is the work of thinking about justice and fairness and all the things that Emma really embodies, is that she realizes there's a systemic issue here and it creates a culture of silence and it creates a culture of harm. So she's going to do what she has to do to step up for her friends, or even if they're strangers, which is what I also love. Sometimes we'll only look out for people that look like us, that come from our backgrounds. And she's like, if someone, I don't care what background you're from, is being harmed, I'm going to step in. So I also, as her mama, because I'm an Enneagram 8, and she might end up being that as well, have to recognize, how can I cultivate a level of softness and care in her? And which is why I think it's really great that kindness is high and love is high for her. She already has a lot of those attributes already, but how do I continue to nourish them in a world that's going to try to make her harden as a Black woman, right? How do I make sure that I continue to cultivate those things? So I think it's important for you to, as a caregiver, as a parent, when you're having your children take this assessment, this one starts at 8, to really think about, ooh, it's great because I see myself in that bravery. Yes, we're going to say the thing, we're going to do the thing, we're going to support, but also, ooh, she has kindness and love. And thinking about my own experience and how that is farther down on my list because of the hardening that I had to do as a Black woman. How do I continue to nurture the kindness and love that she has so that she doesn't think that she always has to be the one, that she learns to build community so that it's not just her, right? So I love that. And I also put hers in ChatGPT. Now, it doesn't have Emma's information, so I thought it was really interesting what it pulled up. So I put in her profile from her VIA character strengths assessment and the responses to the questions that Emma gave me to see what it would generate. So here's what it said. Emma is a young change maker with a heart rooted in empathy and a mind focused on justice. Her bravery and fairness fuel her commitment to standing up for others, while her love of connection strengthens her ability to create meaningful relationships. She is learning early on how resilience, guided by compassion, can transform fear into triumph, a lesson she will carry into her vision for a better world. Amber, Emma's strength and values beautifully reflect the environment of care and advocacy you've cultivated. She is poised to grow into a leader who balances compassion with courage, inspiring others to join her in making the world a more just and caring place. Okay, ChatGPT got me over here wanting to tear up. I love that. I love that the transform the fear into triumph, because we are currently living in a fear-mongering culture that is distracting us from doing the actual work of liberation. And so what this is saying is we can transform that fear. We can go back and think about what our ancestors had to overcome. We can think about what and who lives on the inside of us and our God innate given abilities to not embody fear to the point that it arrest us so that we can't do anything, right? It can't leave us stuck. So we can honor what we are feeling because it is real and it is pertinent to what is happening in our world today. Yes, there are some scary things happening. We can also honor that we can be triumphant, that now that we know the game that's being played, how do we collectively build a beloved community to work towards liberation? I think about the Emmas of the world, these little kids that don't have all of this hate in their hearts, right? And how people and systems break them and dehumanize them. So I can look at the Emmas of the world and see that she wants to support those that are houseless or unhoused. And also she wants to eradicate food insecurity and starvation. Those are the things that if you think back to when you were little and you saw people hurting, I bet there was something within you that said, that's not right. That's not okay. But we grow up to numb ourselves to other people's plight because the world sorts us into saying, that's not my issue. That's someone else's issue. Or the one that I can't stand that people will say when we talk about solving world hunger is, well, the system's set up the way it is and we can't support everyone. If that is not the most harmful narrative that a lot of us buy into currently in this moment, what we're seeing, right, is that people who thought that these executive orders and this administration wasn't going to impact them and they voted for him anyway, when all of that was on display, are now saying, well, it wasn't supposed to impact me. This is all wrong. Can you please tell Mr. President that now it's impacting me and I was his biggest supporter? And I remember reading in the chat, someone said, what you're really saying is it wasn't supposed to hurt me. It was just supposed to hurt the others. And I'm recalling in this moment, Toni Morrison's book, The Origin of Others, and how we can create a storyline that we all buy into, even if we are the other, that we will believe that that is our lot in life. And we have to wake up. We have to continue to cultivate the wisdom from our youth that say, there is something fundamentally wrong about the system that we're in that doesn't care about human beings. So I hope as you reflect on what was shared today, that as you reflect on how you can show up in your fullness and your strengths in a world that tells you to shrink and that you are weak, that you know that you are rightfully strong. And because what I have as a strength might be different than what you have as a strength, but the beauty is that we can collaborate and build community together. Because another part of this is, what do I envision for the future is really attached to my strengths and how I see the world and my lived experience. And how do I partner with others that can help me to fully realize this vision? I hope you check out Strength-Based Collective, Dr. Kelsey Reed's baby and her vision and her movement for this world, that we can be more strengths-based and not focus on something that's wrong with us. So she has elementary, middle school, and high school editions. She has protocols for people that are practitioners. She has a comprehensive handbook for strength-based parenting, empowering families, how we can do our own individual work, right? It starts with us. If you're not doing this work, and this is what I was in conversation with yesterday in a book club, and women were saying, I know and I will do for my children, and I'm not doing this work for myself. And we talk about this, right? Put on your oxygen mask before you can help someone else. We all know it to be true, but we have to unlearn some of these narratives as caregivers, as parents, as women, as Black women, that I somehow have to be darn near hanging on by a thread. And somehow that's a badge of honor that I have sacrificed everything that I am and depleted myself for everyone else. And we're saying no in 2025. This is our era of softness. This is our era of, you know what? I bet I don't, right? So thinking about we have to do our own work in this. And also, what I love is that we will definitely be doing this. I've already bought the guide, The Strengths of the Past, a guide to activism and resilience. So particularly for Black History Month, and because the world is taking away DEI as if somehow if you take it away that we don't exist, taking away securities and mandates as if you take it away or you define things a certain way that I don't exist. I don't define myself by the definitions that you create because you have a very narrow view of who I am. So Emma and I will definitely be engaging in some of these other tools because it focuses on people like Maya Angelou and it gives a biography, and then it talks about Maya Angelou's strengths. And then it also, if you're an educator, gives you classroom activities. So I encourage you to check out Strength-Based Collective, and I'll put that in the show notes as well as my favorites list. And I'd love to hear from you. Once you go through this and do the VIA character strengths survey, sit with it. How does it feel? Try it on and go through your week being like, you know what? I do show up like that. Or, oh, I want to, I have the urge to, I've always known, I've had this itching feeling, but I'm not able to do that in the space that I'm currently in. So what needs to change? What needs to change about the spaces that you're in that you can't show up and apply your strengths in those settings, right? But I'm just encouraged by our listeners. I'm encouraged by Emma, and I'm encouraged by the community that we're building. So take care, y'all, and I'll see you next time.